Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Mortgage Coach Tuesday interview. This is Dave Savage, CEO of Mortgage Coach, and we have a very exciting call today. We've got two amazing guests. I have Wally Elibiary with the Mortgage Coach community. He's going to help me with this interview. Wally, welcome to the call.
Hey, thank you so much for having me back.
Good. It's always good to have you on here, and many of you heard Wally last Tuesday when we were doing a bit of a mastermind call. And we have Brian Johnson joining Mortgage Coach for the second time. Welcome to the call, Brian.
Dave, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for making time. So Mortgage Coach community, I want to give kudos to a few mortgage coaches that were out networking and meeting each other for coffee a few weeks ago. And I just want to remind everybody from last Tuesday's call, one, we are pushing you, urging you to schedule coffee meetings, schedule breakfast meetings, schedule lunch meetings, and just help each other. You know, we all know in this mortgage industry, we are not each other's competition. We're our own competition. So get out there, connect with each other, make each other better. Also wanted to remind folks that we kicked off the Mortgage Coach 100 last week. I think I've already got about 40 submissions of Mortgage Coach professionals that are top producers. There's an email going out today, literally as this call is going, to sign up and see if you're one of the top mortgage coaches in the country. If you're on this call and you're not a top producer, let the top producer in your organization know, to submit. We want to get as many entries as possible into this Mortgage Coach 100. Want to do a quick debrief on last week's calls. We had a couple amazing calls. I interviewed Jocko and Andrew Paul, a mortgage coach and former Navy SEAL who was actually in Jocko's unit. Helped me interview Jocko, which I think made it a pretty interesting and unique interview. If you are on this call now and you were part of that call, please share in chat or in Q&A what your big takeaways were. You know, to me, I had a lot of takeaways, a lot of reminders, but I think, you know, Jocko's message, discipline equals freedom, I think was so powerful, and to me was really the theme of the call. And then Andrew, you know, just kind of adding to that, you know, discipline feeds discipline. Incredibly valuable content, incredibly valuable call. If you were on this call right now and you missed it, can't recommend enough that you listen to that interview. It was special. Wally, did you happen to hear any of the interview? Any comments?
Yeah, I did. Absolutely. And I also love his videos. And Jocko's been somebody I've always looked up to. I think I had him Sales Mastery, what was it, about 3 years ago or so? Was that the first time we saw him there on stage?
Well, the first time was about 3 years ago, and then he was also on main stage last year. So he's been on the place.
And I love his videos, especially one that he talked about, you know, if the world's ending, good. You know, whatever drama happens in your life, the answer needs to be good. It just, either you win or you learn.
I love it. I played that one for my kids, by the way. So they dug it. You know, it's kind of a little theme going around this week. It's like every time anybody says something, they're like, good. So anyway, great message. Hey, Brian, any plans to review Jocko's book or any content coming together around this?
Yeah, I mean, Jocko's such an inspiring guy, and that's awesome. You guys had a chat with him and one of the guys that worked for him who's now doing mortgage stuff. That's super cool. But I loved Extreme Ownership, and yeah, putting together the TV episode now, and excited to share that soon.
Really? So we're going to have a review on this book sometime in the next couple months? Yeah,
it's solid, as you know.
Yeah, I can't wait. It would have been nice to have that before I interviewed Jocko. When I was doing my prep for the interview, and I've added that to kind of my moves now. Whenever I'm kind of prepping, I'm looking for a Brian Johnson video.
Well, just hit me up. I got it kind of in stealth mode right now, but one of the ideas I actually covered was discipline equals freedom. And he tells the story in that book about how he has 3 alarm clocks.
Right?
One digital, one analog, and one wind up. So he never misses an appointment. Pretty funny.
Yeah, no, it's pretty intense, man. This guy is the real deal in every way. So, well, good. Well, let's go ahead, Wally.
No, it's pretty neat to see someone succeed at that high of a level, and it's their passion that drives them, their vision that pulls them. So he's a huge inspiration.
Yeah, no doubt. So, folks, if you missed that interview, check it out, and then as soon as Brian does his breakdown of the book and shares his wisdom, I'll make sure we share that with everybody. So let's get into it, Brian. This is the second time we've had you on a call. You completely crushed it. I mean, I had a blast last time. You know, we went all kinds of different directions. Of course, we always have a couple questions to start the party, but you're really good to have you back. If you could, just for folks that weren't on that last call, you know, share your backstory again and, you know, just why you create so many educational videos.
Yeah, well, the backstory, I think, we'll just start with my purpose. I'm committed to helping people optimize their lives, and it's gotten more and more clear over the last 15, 20 years, but I basically spent half of the last 20 years in business mode as a CEO and a creator of a couple of startups that I sold, and the other half as a philosopher, a lover of wisdom, and just passionate about understanding ancient wisdom, modern science, common sense, virtue, mastery, and fun is how I like to describe it. Just helping people optimize their 21st century lives, and that's what I'm all about.
Wow, those were some powerful words. I mean, I'm going to probably have to listen back to this, write that down, and make that a theme. That was powerful. So you know, how many videos have you created over the past 12 months? And within the context of that, when did you get to the point where you really felt confident that, you know, you're crushing it when it comes to creating video knowledge content?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have the precise number, but I would guess 365 days over the last year. I would guess at least 300. So I'm working toward, I was doing every single day for quite a while, and that's my new standard I'm recommitting to. But I did 5 days a week for a while. So I'd say considerably about 300. And yeah, for me, confidence is an interesting conversation. I mean, the word confidence comes from the Latin confidere, with trust is what it means. So basically to have confidence is to have trust in yourself. And it's not necessarily that you're going to crush whatever you're doing. It's that you can handle whatever challenge comes at you. So Jocko style, something doesn't go the way you want, you win or you learn, good. That's awesome. That's confidence. You trust yourself to be able to dust yourself off, get back up, and do what needs to get done. And that's my approach, is a really long range, just show up, do the work, get a little bit better today, get a little bit better tomorrow. And, you know, so for me it's less about any particular episode and more about just getting a little bit better. And then ultimately, you said it perfectly in the intro, to help people. That's how I deal with any stress I might feel arise in terms of performance. It's not about me. Let me just help someone. One person. Literally, before I do every video, I do the same kind of pre-shot routine, right? And for me, that's a deep breath, you know, inhale to 6, hold for 2, exhale for 8, calm myself, and then I say one person. I want to help one person, and then let it rip. Just whatever I got is what I've got, let it rip. That's my approach, and I try to take the focus off of myself as much as I can and just, you know, try to do good work.
Now, how many videos do you think you had to, you know, create before you really felt like you were doing this well? I mean, was it 5, 10, 100? How many times did you have to create video content to feel that you're getting pretty good at this thing and you were feeling pretty comfortable doing it?
Well, it's a funny answer, because I think I used to hate being in front of the camera and I used to avoid it. And then I realized I just need to get used to it and acclimated myself to that, so it no longer became something that I kind of avoided. And then, you know, I have a healthy level of dissatisfaction, and I think that's a really important thing, that I always know I can do better. So I'm simultaneously holding, yeah, that was, I measure myself less on how did I do and more on I did it. Because the old me would have wanted to do it perfectly, so I never would have done anything. And the new me measures myself on process. So for me, discipline equals freedom, to use another Jocko phrase. I'm not as concerned about the outcome of any one thing that I do, and more about, well, I showed up. And if I continue to show up and I push my edge, I'm going to get better and better. So that's kind of my orientation. Having said that, well, that's just how I approach it. I don't really think, yeah, I'm really good at that. I think, wow, I'm blessed that people are watching them, and I feel like I'm reasonably competent. And I also know there's a huge gap between where I want to be and where I am, and then I just get back to work.
So how do you measure that? Meaning, like, along the lines of, obviously it sounds like you go after progress, not perfection, which is absolutely awesome. How do you measure you improving when you're making those videos?
Well, again, there's, like, yesterday I was working on, I'm kind of building in Anders Ericsson is the researcher behind the whole 10,000-hour phenomena that Malcolm Gladwell
Okay.
popularized. So his new book is called Peak, and he finally wrote kind of a mainstream book on that, and he talked about what practice actually does in terms of improving your performance. And you can't just do the same thing over and over again. You actually have to meet certain standards that he talks about. For me yesterday, for example, what I was working on was just truly being me, and less about trying to say things a certain way, but being comfortable being imperfect, and just kind of letting that rip. So that was a focal point of yesterday's. But the way that I measure the process side of it is, it's a quantifiable thing for me, where I produce 10 new philosophers notes a month. I produce 2 new master classes where I break down a big concept like confidence, or last week was sleep. Next week I'm going to do fatherhood 101, that sort of thing. So just doing that forces me to show up, and then I'm always looking for little 4% improvements. So for me, it's not about the big swing and knock it out of the park in one shot. It's about just deliberate, patient, incremental improvement, and then I'm always finding little 4% ways to improve, and that's what fires me up the most.
You definitely feel like you've got a lot of wisdom and patience that you've learned over time, that it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, and really it's sprints within the context of a marathon. So for me, I like to go hard, and then I like to recover. Before, I just used to go hard, and there'd be that burnout, and I just didn't have the balance and the structure in my life. And now I'm all about, that diligent, intense focus, but then allowing recovery. Nights of sleep, for example. I used to stay up super late. Now it's done. Sun goes down, I'm done. Shut down complete. Start the next morning fresh, and taking those breaks during the day. Super mundane things that are what I found, and we talked about this a lot last time, is the core to greatness. It's the consistency on the most basic, mundane, unsexy fundamentals compounded over time that leads to all the results we want to see, as we know.
Yeah, and it sounds like when you talked about, and so I make sure I understand you and our viewers understand, would it make sense to say, instead of being a stock going up and down, up and down, up and down, you've kind of stair-stepped your success. You go up, rest, rest. Yeah,
and then of course there's plateaus, and of course there's those zigs and zags. I mean, that's actually one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in my life, is it isn't up and to the right. It may be up and to the right when you step back far enough, but there are zigs and there are zags, and as I've learned to embrace that, it's really allowed me, it's given me, another source of freedom, is to see that that's just how mastery works. Mastery is not one perfectly, coordinated rise up and to the right. It's often 3 steps forward and 1 step back, or 3 steps back stumbling and crawling back 1 or 2, and as I've embraced that, and then the most challenging thing I think in mastery is to embrace the plateau when it's no longer sexy and fun. That's when, now when I feel that, it's rub my hands together, okay, this is now officially a little boring. It's fun to read books and distill it, but what I do is simultaneously very interesting and very boring. I read books, I break them down, and then I produce different things. I read another book, I break it down, I do that. And I do that again and again and again and again. And that's not always awesome, And so for me to be able to embrace that plateau and to know that things are a little bit more mellow right now, and that's exciting for me now. I'm going to go up and I'm going to hit it again, and do that again and again and again without constantly looking at, is everything moving? Are the external signs there that's signifying that everything's okay? Which is what I used to do all the time. Now it's continue doing what I know to be fundamental to my success, and master myself in the process.
Yeah, but when you said, I think it was on the last call that I heard, kind of stopped me in my tracks. You had said you deliver more wisdom in less time, and I absolutely just kind of fell in love with that, just because, as a mortgage lender myself, I'll spend 30, 45 minutes with a client, kind of finding out what their short-term goals, what their long-term goals, like structure options to kind of maximize their buying power. But then I'll do like a 2-3 minute video breaking everything down and emailing it to and review it with them. And I was listening to your videos, and say if you have a 5 or 7 minute video and you read a 200 or 300 page book, one thing I'm just kind of watching, like your 5 or 7 minute video is ridiculously impactful. Like every breath you take, it's just like a huge aha moment. Is that something that you've been blessed with, a skill you've taught yourself? Like, is that a model you've learned, or how would you break that down?
Well, first of all, I appreciate your kind words, and It's funny because I interviewed a guy, Lanny Basham, who's a gold medal winning rifle shooter, one of the most decorated rifle shooters in the country, who wrote a great book called With Winning in Mind. And he was super generous and nice after our interview. He said, how do you get to the state you're at right now and pretty good at what you're doing? And I told him I've done it 350 times, you know. This is the X number of things. I know you laughed and you said repetitions. Yep, it always comes back to repetitions. So that's my thing. And his son, when I interviewed his son, he was also an extraordinary teacher. He said that the average performer, the kind of decent to pretty good performer, does something until they can get it right. And he said the elite champion does it until they can't get it wrong. And that's my whole attitude, is I'm humble enough to say that I'm humble enough, which reveals my lack of humility in that context, but to know that I have a lot of work to do. And that's my biggest discipline, is to just stretch it out. I'm going to do 1,000 philosopher's notes. I've done 354 at this stage. And that's it. Show up through 2020 and resist all the other temptations and just try to get a little bit better each time. But yeah, that's a lot of practice. And you know, in my systems, like I go through a book now, and it's you do anything that many times, and you make little distinctions. And I think that's what it's all about. As a mortgage coach, or as what I'm doing, it's just those tiny 4% improvements compounded over time, and again, over time, that leads to the extraordinary results that I think we want to see.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, when you're reading a book, I mean, do you feel that there's a rumor has it there's a question behind the question, but do you ever feel when an author is sharing a story, is there a story behind the story that they're sharing? And it's your job your world to unravel that?
Yeah, I think I read nonfiction, obviously, exclusively, pretty much. And when I approach a book, the attitude that I have when I sit down with a book is, okay, I'm sitting down with an extraordinary human being who dedicated a significant part of their life, if not their entire life, in the context of Anders Ericsson and these other, you know, guys who waited 40 years before they wrote a book. And so I don't believe in speed reading. I don't believe in skimming a book a day, you know, which is nothing wrong with that if you want to get the basic high-level ideas. But for me, when I sit down, it's a conversation. I literally imagine like I'm sitting up across from someone at a coffee shop and having a cup of coffee or tea or whatever, and trying to understand how they see the world. And then in my experience, as I do this more, it's actually very bright lines. And I'm always looking for those very, very clear statements that I have learned to take literally. When an author says, this is the most important idea in the book, I slow down and I say, really? Okay. Because you spent 40 years thinking about this and you're going to tell me this is the most important thing. That might change my life. That's the way I approach it. And then always thinking about how do I translate that in a meaningful way that's super practical for people so they can actually engage in it without, you know, having the time that I do to do this full time, you know.
That's pretty neat. Absolutely neat. I loved another quote that you had said that I've just written down. I've actually probably written it down about 30 times now. You know, give your best to the most for the least. Is that to me that sounded like you have a servant's heart because you want to help so many people and you want to impact them the most, but you don't need to charge an arm or a leg because there's some people that might not be as financially blessed, but you know it's your duty to help everyone with that aspect.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And as you were talking, and again, I appreciate your kind words, and that's certainly the aspiration, is to really lead with that service in mind. And when you guys were talking about Jocko, it reminded me of one of the most recent books I read is called Grit, which I'm sure you guys have familiar with Angela Duckworth and her TED Talk, and extraordinary human being. And she actually, the first place she studied wasn't the Navy SEALs, it was the West Point cadets. And at West Point, they have to go through, you know, they spend like 2 years trying to get into West Point. They have to get a congressional letter of recommendation or a senator or a vice president to nominate them. They have to do these extraordinary things just to get into West Point. And then before they start their first year, they have to spend 7 weeks in something called Beast Barracks. And it was amazing because a ton of these amazing individuals would drop out before the 4 years, and most of them dropped out during this Beast Barracks after putting in all that effort. And military scientists spent decades trying to understand and predict who would drop out and who wouldn't. And it wasn't until Angela Duckworth came in and she created a scale to measure their grit. So they had something called a whole candidate score, which looked at things like GPA, SAT scores, leadership experience, athletic captainships, and stuff like that. But none of it predicted whether they'd stay through the hard times or not, and deal with the stress and have grit. She came in, created this grit score, 10 questions, and she'll basically identify your level of passion over an extended period of time and your level of perseverance. And I share this because one of the key aspects of grit that she found was purpose. And purpose is all about being committed to something bigger than yourself. If it's just about you, you're not going to be too gritty. You're going to give up when things get hard. But if you're committed to something bigger than yourself, there's power in that, there's energy in that, and vitality in that. And this is where greatness occurs, is that nexus point. She has 4 qualities. Interest, you need to be engaged in it and be passionate about it. Practice, you got to show up and actually practice deliberately, Anders Ericsson style. And then you need to have purpose. You need to be committed to something bigger than yourself, and then you need to have hope. The idea that your future is going to get you better than your present if you continue to work hard. So that interest, practice, purpose, and hope form the cornerstone of grit. And when we talk about confidence, we talk about dealing with stress and that sort of thing. Purpose is central to it. Has to be.
And that purpose comes from having a larger vision of yourself.
Yeah, and for you articulated part of my purpose, which is to give the best to the most for the least. That inspires me, to astonish and to lead with value. But yeah, when life becomes about more than just me, I have a lot more power, and that's the basic idea of purpose, is you're committed to something bigger than yourself. It can be your family, it can be your craft, it can be your country, it can be anything, but just that extension provides fuel for sustained peak performance.
So guys, I want to jump in real quick. So a couple things, everybody. While they've been talking, I have been skipping around some of Brian Johnson's YouTube page. Again, I don't know a body of knowledge, a body of wisdom that's more comprehensive, more valuable than this. The way I first came across Brian was when I was doing some prep for a call with Hal Elrod. I've interviewed Hal 3 times. I wish I would have seen your book review before the first interview. But really great book. Hal's spoken in our industry several times. I've interviewed him several times. And regardless of all that, folks, if you haven't listened to Brian's review of the book, you should review it. I mean, it's a great review of the book. I also posted The One Thing by Gary Keller because, it's so relevant to our industry as realtors. And as Brian was talking about grit, I also posted that. So those are in the chat. Check it out. And again, if you have not already, gone in and subscribed to Brian's YouTube page, can't recommend it enough. And of course, if you're like me and so many other mortgage coach members that I'm hearing from, I really urge you to, subscribe to his Optimal Life. Optimize with Brian Johnson. I think it's like $10 a month, Brian. And, I cannot think of a better ROI than subscribing to your content. And getting all the content you have on YouTube, plus a whole lot more. I mean, it goes a lot deeper, a great community. We'll talk about more of that later in the call. So, Wally, I do have a couple questions I want to ask, but anything else you want to drill down on before I transition to a couple of questions and really start getting into the book and the review on Cal Report?
No, please go for it. I'll keep sitting here taking notes.
Okay, so one of the things that really asked me to ask Brian back this week was the book review that he did on Cal Newport, where it's like, be so good that you can't be ignored. What an amazing concept. And in the mortgage industry, I think it really comes down to be so good that you're the obvious choice. How amazing would it be if you were so amazing as a mortgage professional that every time you talk to a family, you were just so obviously good that you couldn't be ignored. And every time you sat down with a realtor, you were just so good you couldn't be ignored. And the loan officers that I interviewed on last Tuesday's call, all 6 of them, they really are, and Wally was one of them. They're so good they just cannot be ignored. So that's an important concept that we want to spend a lot of this call talking about. But Brian, before we do that, I want you to just talk about the concept of being 1% better every day. In this call you mentioned 4% better. Yep. Well, let's just take it down to 1%. If you just got 1% better, and by the way, for mortgage coaches out there, at doing a total cost analysis and recording a video, if you just got 1% better per day, how much better would you be at the end of the year? And also just talk about that concept, and then we'll transition into Cal's review.
Yeah, for me, the 1% better is really a mindset, and it starts with the idea, very obvious one, but you can either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Fixed mindset isn't fixed. I can't get any better. We all know that all success comes from the growth mindset, which is I can get better. And then every single thing that happens to us, we win or we lose, good, awesome, I'm going to get better, I'm going to get stronger as a result of this, true confidence. With that growth mindset, for me, I make it a game. And I'm literally thinking about how I can create little efficiencies in everything that I do. So like when I'm preparing for a class, for example, I teach on Monday mornings. It's when I'm best and when I'm fired up, right? Because I structure it, and that's just, I'm ready to hit Monday mornings. I'm not rolling out of bed, oh, bummer, Monday. I'm fired up for Mondays. And so I've learned little things like, okay, I don't want to train really hard. I teach at 9 a.m. I don't want to train really hard on Monday mornings. I do a quick little 10-minute, some burpees and some rowing, but not crazy. But the day before, I'll do an intense HIIT workout. Now that might not sound like a big deal, and it isn't, but that's a tiny little 1% tweak for me that I've kind of learned, and then I systematize that. Now, on Sunday, I do an intense HIIT workout, and on Monday, I know I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And if you look back at my life over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it's been a systematic game of that. And I wish it was 20 years ago, because it'd just be crazy nuts at this point. It's been an intense on and off relationship of intensity. It's now all in, let's get better. But that idea of what do you do when you're on, first of all, we need to bake those into just who you are. And we talked about this a lot last time. The fundamentals need to be just engraved into who you are. And as we talked about Darren Hardy style, compound that over time, and then constantly look for those little ways that you can improve and literally make it a game. And when you come up with an idea, you celebrate it, you high-five yourself, and you implement it, and then continue to build on that day in and day out. I'm not sure if that was super helpful, but that's a meandering thought.
No, it was a good meandering thought. But I want folks to really connect with the exponential value. If you just got 1% better every day, would you be 300% better?
Well,
how much better would you be?
Let's do the, I'm actually going to open up the compound effect here and just look at his example, because the compound effect, which most of us, you guys, know better than I do, you know, the penny principle and how that adds up. But that magic of a penny, right? Those two choices, I'm going to just look at I'm literally looking at my notes right now on the compound effect. So pulling from Darren Hardy's great book, I can give you $3 million in cash today, bam, or I'll give you a penny and double it every day for 31 days. Which one do you want? Right?
Penny, please.
Yeah, right? We've thought about this, right? But $3 million today, wow, that's pretty cool. Big hit, quick hit, I got rich, how you doing, right? Day 5, you took the penny, you look like an idiot, right? He says you have 16 cents. It doubles every day. On day 10, you have $5.12, and your buddy's got $3 million. You're wondering if you made the right decision. You're 20 days in, and you only have $5,243. You're really? Bummer. Then the magic of the compound effect kicks in, Darren tells us. Fast forward to day 31, and note it makes a difference, whether it's February or July, right? Day 31, you have $10,737,418.24 to the $3 million if you had taken it on day 1. And that's the stay away from the get it quickness, right? Focus on intensity, sustained over a long period of time. Let that compound. That's where all the magic is, which is why in the beginning of our chat, I kept on coming back to my focus on progress and just process and show up knowing that these results will take care of themselves, but I don't need to go dig up my seed every day in the garden and check and see how it's growing. I know that if I just do the work and measure it on, they like to say, horticultural time over seasons and years, not over seconds and days and weeks and months, that I'm going to achieve the success I want to achieve.
Right on. Well, that was what I wanted to get at. I also put the Darren Hardy link to the review that you did in chat, so check it out. And Wally, where would you like to take it at this point?
Well, no, just unwrap that a little bit more. You talked about, I think it was the last call, you talked about the One Thing book by Gary Keller, and obviously Gary talks about and teaches being, we're naturally entrepreneurial, and we just do the best that we can, the best that we know how. he takes it further and teaches how to be very purposeful. And that's, instead of doing the best you can do, it's doing it the best way it can be done. In your world, in your life, how or when did that click with you for you to have that passion to want to do it the best way it can be done instead of just simply doing the best you can do daily?
Yeah, such great questions. I really appreciate it, Wally. So it starts with the one thing. So Gary Keller's One Thing, as you know, Dave, is one of my favorites. And I love it even more after reading The Science of Grit, because she's all about one thing. Gritty people, by definition, by her definition, they sustain a passion. People who aren't gritty, their passion, she says, they're like fireworks. It's like a fireworks show. They get fired up about something, they do it for a month or two or three, or even a year or two or three, then they're on to the next thing. Fireworks, boom, they blow up, they're awesome to see, then they go away. She says truly gritty people have the courage to bet on something, to go all in on something that they're willing to give their lives to, and it's not like a fireworks show, it's like a compass. Their purpose and their interest is sustained over a long period of time. And for me, I used to be Mr. Firework guy. I would be into this, and then, you know, for whatever constellation of reasons, I would be into something else, right? And a big moment happened for me about 18 months ago when I was running a business. I'd raised $2 million from friends and my family and some extraordinary human beings on a certain business model that was very complex, had a bunch of things. I couldn't even read Gary Keller's book beyond page 5 because it hurt me to read because I was doing way too many things and I knew it. But I couldn't get myself to read the book. Long story short, I blew up that business. We had about $1 million of revenue, took it to $0 of revenue, and I focused on one thing. We had hundreds of teachers. It became, I was teaching. That was my calling. That's what I'm here to do. And when I made that decision, Stephen Pressfield, the great writer and creative teacher, says, you need to go from being an amateur to turning pro. He says the day you turn pro is the day that you live the way you're describing, Wally, in that question, which is you're all in. You're no longer hedging your bet. He says the amateur, which comes from the root to love, to be an amateur is to love something. He says that's not accurate. If you really love something, you turn pro, you go all in. So for me, I have been avoiding my calling of doing my work as a teacher, and when I decided to go all in, make it a one thing, I do one thing. I sell one membership for $10 a month. You cannot get me to do anything else, period, nothing. I don't do any coaching, I don't do any speaking, I don't do anything. I do that, one thing, as a function of all the mistakes I made trying to do too many things. And it's working very well, and we're very excited about where we're headed. But anyway, that one thing focused my energy, and now it's exhilarating to be able to identify the levers I need to pull to execute that strategy well and to ruthlessly do what I described to you in the beginning, and to be willing to be boring and show up and do the same thing day in and day out because I've decided that's what's going to lead to that fundamental success. And then, to your real question, how do I do it better than I've ever done it before, and you know, can it be done better than it's ever been done before? That's the explicit intention of Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Seahawks, who Angela Duckworth profiles in her book Grit. Every single play of every single practice, what the Seahawks want to do is compete. They want to do the best they possibly can in that play. He puts a tremendous amount of pressure on them in that context so they can perform so well in the bigger context. For me, that word is captured by the Greek concept of arete, which we talked about last time as well, I think. The Greeks said if you want to flourish, if you want to really be happy and reach your highest potential, you have to do it this moment. And they had a word for it called arete, where you express, basically it means you express the highest potential within yourself, this moment, the next moment, the next moment. And if you do that, there's no room for regret and anxiety and disillusionment. And ultimately, I'm looking at a simple index card that has arete on it. If I look at my whiteboard, it says arete on it. Hal Elrod's team, I'm going to pause in a moment, but Hal Elrod's team was out filming me for his documentary he's creating, and they asked me if I had a vision board. I said, you know what, I don't have a vision board. And I jokingly said, look, there's my vision board, and I pointed to my whiteboard, and the only thing on my whiteboard was arete, was can I live at my highest potential moment to moment to moment. That's my vision, and that's the ultimate commitment.
Love it, love it, love it. And that's I'm like, I think I'll have to listen to this video like another 10 times to get 10% of what I want to get out of it. That's awesome. When you made the video masterpiece, and you talked about, building your masterpiece of a day, and I mean, just with your permission, may I ask, like, what is your masterpiece of your day?
Yeah, well, my masterpiece day starts the night before. So my best
Okay.
energy, one of the key concepts of all creative thinkers is you have to match your best energy.
Okay.
Whenever you're best, you got to do what you're best at. Gary Keller, this is his one thing. I mean, he says that time blocks are I quote, the number one power tool for time management. You have to create deep time blocks where you can do deep work. So for me, my morning starts early because my night ends early. Digital sunset, sun goes down, I go down, family time, no more work, go to bed super early. It's a sport for me to go to bed early because I want to get up early feeling great. And that's
Hold on, I've got to
typically,
ask you real quick. What is early? Because I mean, I'm usually in bed by 8:30, 9, and my kids make fun of me. So what is
oh, that's
early for you?
great. It depends winter and summer. I actually really like winters because the days are a little shorter that I can get away with
Okay.
going to bed earlier because the sun sets so early. Here in Southern California, the sun sets at before 5. So it's not
Oh
insane to go to
wow.
bed like at 7. What else am I going to do, right? And then I get up at, whatever, 3:34, and I'm just on fire, and I got 3 hours before the family gets up. In the summer, it's a little different, but, the agreement I have with my wife, and we're always tweaking it, is I'm all in. I shut off at 5, and I'm all in, dad time, family time, and I want to be able to clock out basically at 7:30, right, where their son's tucked in, and I'm just doing my thing. My nighttime ritual, always the same, basic stuff. I take a shower and get to bed so I can get up early and crank it. So I'm impressed. 8:30 is solid as well. And it's good to be made fun of for things like this.
Well, it's like, they're still up, and I'm like, all right, love you guys, good night. And
That's really funny.
I get up about 4:30 every morning, and it's like one of those things. If I don't get in bed by like 8:39, it's just I'm dragging.
Yep. Yeah, and then I just taught a class on optimal sleep 101, and I talk with Hal's team about this a lot, but sleep is so important. And would you rather wake up to an alarm or have an alarm go off at night that tells you it's time to go to bed? And we know scientifically, and we can talk about this with So Good They Can't Ignore You, that the number one thing to work satisfaction, literally, is autonomy. It's the ability to make your own choices, right? And everyone who's listening to this who's an entrepreneur knows it's one of the reasons why they like being an entrepreneur. So I can't understand why anyone would choose deliberately to have the first act of their day be something absent of autonomy, to be controlled, where you're getting coerced out of bed by your alarm clock. Like that, to me, I literally can't imagine that. And so for me, it's a lot easier and a lot more fun to set the alarm at night saying it's time to shut down. And I'm willing to trade that hour of entertainment at night so I can get up feeling refreshed in the morning without an alarm and rocking it. Now that's so counter our culture, which for most things is a good sign. It's probably a wise thing to do.
Well, it's such a disruptive move. You,
Yeah,
you,
when you're
it,
clear on your one
Go
thing, it's
ahead.
an easy thing to do. George St. Pierre, the uber successful UFC fighter, right?
Uh-huh.
When he decided he was going to be the best fighter in the world, which was a decision for him, which his father thought was crazy at the time, and most people thought was crazy, but he decided he was going to do that. Then he didn't go to clubs. He didn't go out. If you looked at George St. Pierre's routines and what he does, he makes me look like I'm like this clubber, like just going out and raging. But he said that when he made these decisions to not do the things that all of his friends were doing, it wasn't a sacrifice. It was a decision. He made the decision that his one thing was to be the best in the world at what he does. And so everything else was a decision that supported that ultimate concern, that ultimate decision. But they weren't sacrifices. Why is it a big deal? Why does he want to wake up hungover? That's not going to support his one thing. So that's the level of I think, clarity that Angela Duckworth says gritty people have, and then they're willing to make the decisions, decide to cut off things that don't support their ultimate intention.
It's a great mindset to have. If it's not, obviously you want to feed your dreams and starve your fears. And if you've got that same mindset, you've built a great bunker around your life, and you only allow in it what's going to help you grow.
It's really hard to do. It's the most creative thing we're ever going to do. I taught a class on creativity, and I said the number one creative project is your life. And Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the great, great, eminent positive psychologist, says the same thing. Truly great creators with a capital C who do things that change the world, they're fierce. They're clear on what they're going to do, and then they go out and do it. And for me, that's balanced by, I want to be really clear that I'm really intense about my professional commitments and creative commitments, but I strive to be, I can't say that I am, but I strive to be equally intense with my family commitments, you know, and I want to win Dad of the Year and do my life's work. So that's the commitment. And then there's not a lot of room for, where's entertainment in a kind of addictive sense fit into that? It doesn't fit into that. And just being willing to have that clarity and to be willing to make the trade-offs on the things that are truly important is, I think it's a courageous thing and a really rewarding thing.
Dave, you still with us?
I am still here. So I am still here. So let's kind of tie this all together. While I have assigned a number of videos that for folks, whatever we're talking about that really connects with you, every video we've assigned is amazing and you'll get tremendous value out of it. You pick which ones are most valuable to you. This particular video that I have on screen right now, so if you have stopped paying attention to the screen, check it out. I'm going to walk you through a few ideas. But this concept about being so good you can't be ignored. First of all, there were some things that were, you know, they contradicted even what I had thought. You know, I mean, it makes perfect sense, but it really made me look at skills differently and the whole, you know, the difference between passion and skills. You know, do you have the passion and you build the skills, or do you build the skills and you get the passion? So if you could walk us through this, because I do think it's enlightening for mortgage professionals who, you know, everybody on this call, they either are incredibly elite, really good at what they do, they are the obvious choice to a family when they meet them, to a realtor when they meet them, or they want to become the obvious choice. So let's unpack this, you know, really for the rest of the call. Let's just unpack the concepts within this video and see where that goes.
Yeah, so the high level, so good they can't ignore you. Cal Newport, MIT PhD, computer science, huge brain. He's now a professor at Georgetown and just a really good guy. His subtitle was Why Skills Trump Passion in the Quest for Work You Love. And his big thesis in this book is the idea that in today's culture, most people are told, follow your bliss, follow your passion, and that will be enough. And his point is, really, it's not enough. And he you know, he uses examples like the yoga teacher who's really passionate about yoga and goes and gets a 200-hour certification and then finds that the marketplace doesn't want to reward them for their, quote, hard work. And he says you need to juxtapose the passion mindset, which primarily asks, what's in it for me? How do I create my ideal lifestyle design? With the craftsman mindset. The craftsman mindset says, how can I serve? How can I help? How can I become so good they can't ignore me? Which, to take that tangent for a moment, is a quip that Steve Martin used to give. So Steve Martin, if you look at Steve Martin's career, the guy hustled. And as a successful comedian, people would ask him, young aspiring comedians would ask him, hey, how do I get, you know, to where you are? And they'd ask him things like, how do I get an agent? And how do I do this? And he would kind of just tell them, whatever, just get so good they can't ignore you. So Cal ran with that idea, and that's the basic idea is passion vis-a-vis craftsman, and that you need to focus on being a craftsman and just developing yourself day in and day out. We can talk about the deliberate practice, etc., to get that good. Now, I think I say in the note, I didn't say it in the video that much, but in the note I talk about the fact that I think he overstated it a little bit. I don't think it's either or. And Angela Duckworth's research confirms that you actually need both. You need both a passion and a craftsman mindset. You need to be really passionate about what you're doing, but not from a narcissistic, hey, check me out, I have all the extrinsic markers of success. You need to match that with the purpose and the practice and that long-term horizon. But that's the basic frame. We can obviously drill in. Let me know where you want to go with it.
Yeah, well, I'll let Wally take the first crack. I mean, Wally, you've watched this video. You're familiar with both the interview, which, by the way, folks, if you like what we're talking about, I really urge you to listen to the video of the actual interview. And personally, I would listen to that first, and then I would do a debrief with Brian's, you know, where he nets out the book in 10 minutes. That's just the sequence in which I think you'll get the most value. And then obviously read the book yourself. But I just think this is one of those messages where I wish I would have heard it when I was younger. I mean, I think I kind of figured it out over the course of my lifetime, but I can still remember early on, when you're trying to like, is this what I should do? Is this what I should do? Is this what I'm going to be passionate about? And I was fortunate enough in the mortgage industry to, fall in love with this business. It happened to be, something I could make enough money to, surpass my income goals. And I think it was just, a little bit of luck that I fell into this. But let's talk about that. And then, Wally, if there's something specific within this content that you want Brian to talk about, let us know what that is.
No, it's just when you talk about passion versus craftsman. Well, I guess quick question, Brian, are you a golfer at all?
I was more of a golfer before. That's one of the although I was never really into it. But I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, no, it's just when you talk about passion and the craftsman. I used to love playing golf, and I put that in the passion category. Versus, and I think I was maybe like a 15 or 17 handicap or something like that about 5 years or so ago, and I got challenged by a friend of mine that just, when I'd call him to go play golf, he'd say, hey, well, instead of golf, why don't you come to me with the range? I'm like, no, let's go play. He goes, no, come to the range first, practice, then we'll go play. And we started, instead of playing golf 2-3 times a week, it was practicing once a week, then playing golf maybe once a week. And this is the mindset when you talked about how I related to that was I got down from a 15 to 17 handicap to within about 5 years getting down to about a 5 handicap. And I learned that the craftsman mindset of putting in the work and the effort, and golf just became so much more fun.
Yep.
Most people think like when follow your passion, it's fun. It's follow your passion. But if you go out there and you suck at your passion, it's not much fun. If you practice the craftsman aspect of it, and then it makes your passion a lot more fun. Excellent. That okay at all?
I completely agree. That's awesome in all fronts. Nice work. And that's exactly what the research shows, that just going out and golfing doesn't make you any better. As anyone who just goes out and golfs knows, it's like just driving doesn't make you a better driver. Anders Ericsson is so explicit. You have to deliberately practice. You have to have a very specific goal for each practice session. You have to be willing to stretch yourself out of your comfort zone, get the feedback, and be focused. And it's interesting because this ties to, I love the etymology of all these words and concepts. And the Greeks have another one that juxtapose hedonic pleasure, which feels good. So you can go out and around to golf and get half drunk, and that hedonically feels good, right? It's not as, quote, fun and joyful or pleasurable to go to the range and not hit your driver, but to hit your wedge to a certain distance, 70 yards away, however many times you do, right? That requires more work. They call that eudaimonia. There's hedonic pleasure, then there's eudaimonic pleasure. Eudaimonic pleasure often doesn't even feel great in the moment, but it gives you a deeper sense of joy and a sense of enthusiasm and connection to life because you're flourishing, which is their word for happiness. Isn't happiness. It's flourishing, which is different. Happiness is 6-pack of beer, barbecue, boom, I'm happy. Flourishing is I'm challenging myself. I'm getting a little bit better, and that's often hard. When you're climbing Everest, you're not always having a great time. Yet there's a deeper purpose that's driving you, that's catalyzing you, that has this essence of true joy that's in eudaimonia, not in the hedonic pleasure. So a little philosophical aside, but I love everything you said, and it's exactly on.
Well, it's the biggest thing of that delayed gratification. I mean, where I think our world is such an instant world, and when you said earlier in the call, optimizing your 21st century life, I mean that we want everything like yesterday. And I'm not sure who said this quote, but I've wrote it down. It's here on my keyboard, and it's you can have everything you want in life. You just can't have it all today. And if you work for it, you can accomplish it. So I love the passion of the craftsman.
Yeah, exactly. And again, there's research on this called the marshmallow test 40 years ago, brought kids into the lab, and you resist that one marshmallow and to get 2 later. And it's a very trainable thing, which is important to note. You can train that level of discipline and self-mastery. And it was also very predictive. The kids that at that age could resist the temptation outperform the other kids in basically every metric. Willpower, self-mastery is so important.
Okay, so put yourself in that tester's shoes. Like literally, that's a question I want to ask. So Brian, you're one of those testers. Could you sit there and watch their faces and they're so antsy to get that next marshmallow?
Well, this is a great question, and it's so perfectly contextual because, again, in grit, I shared with you some of the ways that Angela says the science of how you build grit from the inside out is interest, practice, purpose, and hope. Then she says, well, how do you build grit from the outside in? And she talks about business and parenting and other like sports teams and stuff like that. And by the way, before I forget saying it, the number one way to boost your grit is to join a community of people who have high standards and meet them. Because you have peer pressure in a healthy way, it's going to make you a better person. So this community you guys have created is a big example of that, and the coffee that you're talking about. Hang out with people who are doing better things than you in different facets of their life is going to make you better. In parenting, so we talk about watching those kids grimace and squeal and all that stuff and not immediately give them the 2 marshmallows, right? She says that if you want to create gritty kids, you need to be what she calls a wise parent. If you want to be a wise parent, you need to be high in 2 different things. You need to have very high standards, right? So you got to have high standards, and you got to be willing to challenge your kids and hold them to a high standard, obviously. But you also, at the same time, want to be warm and loving and supportive. If all you are is a guy or a woman with high standards, you're going to be authoritarian, right? You're going to be cold with high standards. Or if you're a person that's really warm and really cuddly, but you have really low standards to go with that, you're permissive. Neither one of which are wise. You want to be wise, high standards and super supportive. And then if you want grit, you need to embody grit. You've actually got to have the ability to delay the gratification. And when you make mistakes and you fall short, you got to rub your hands together and say, yep, Daddy makes mistakes too. Ha, I do that every day. It's awesome. We laugh about our mistakes. And my son the other day, 3.5 years old, he told me, I've told him obviously a number of times for him to repeat this to me. He made a mistake. He said, I made a mistake. He said, that's okay. That's part of the learning process. Like, oh, this is so good. Did I say that? This is awesome. Part of the learning process. We've got to embody that, and it's bring you back to your golf course and you're willing to make the mistake, look at the feedback honestly, and then try to get a little bit better with your next shot. As we embrace that as parents and resist the 2 marshmallows and embody all of our ideals, kids rarely listen to us. Angela quotes the guy saying, they rarely listen to us, but they rarely fail to imitate us. So we've got to be who we aspire them to be, right?
Love it.
Absolutely.
So powerful, Brian. So we've got about 8 minutes left. I really want to go into another category because when I think of what mortgage professionals need to be more successful, they need to, they need to have a great borrower conversation. Now, at Mortgage Coach, we help them drive that with this total cost analysis. And once you've done it 20 plus times, your comfort zone expands and you get better. But the other thing mortgage professionals need is they need to prospect more. They need to make calls. I've interviewed, hundreds of the nation's best mortgage professionals, and they all have a number of things in common, and I don't have time to get into all those, but they all have a higher comfort zone when it comes to prospecting, reaching out to new realtors, scheduling meetings, whether they have assistants that help them or whether they did it themselves. They've expanded their comfort zone. And then, of course, when I talk to the best mortgage coaches, they didn't get there because they did it 5 times or 10 times. They built this, they expanded their comfort zone. So let's wrap up in the last 7 minutes. Some ideas around how comfort zone works. And then, Brian, any wisdom you can share with us that would help everybody on this call kind of audit where they're at and provide some leadership that would help folks on this call expand their comfort zone in the areas that matter most to them.
Right on. So I'll try to articulate it concisely. Anders Ericsson, the guy who did 10,000 hours, whole another conversation about that because it was actually more than 10,000 hours and less in some context. But his whole point was you need to get out of your comfort zone. And he walks through the science of why it actually works. If all you're doing is what's comfortable, you will never improve, period. That's a scientific fact. But the moment you go out of your comfort zone, what happens is your body so wants to be comfortable, it loves homeostasis, that when you exit your comfort zone, your body so dislikes that it makes you stronger. It wants to recover. This is basic weight training 101, right? Where you stress your body with weights, then what happens? You get stronger. Why is that? Because your body is saying, wow, we couldn't handle that stress very well. We're going to make ourselves stronger so we can next time. And that's why you need to go outside of your comfort zone And why I dropped the 4% is that that's the number Steven Kotler came up with. He's a guy who studied flow and how you get really good. His book is called The Rise of Superman. And when I asked him about this in our interview, that was his big thing, is 4%. It's not crazy, it's just a little bit, 4%. So when you are willing to exit your comfort zone, you create a new comfort zone, which is way more expensive than your old one. And when you compound that over time, like our pennies, you have obviously an extraordinary return. That comes to mind, and then I would identify, which I know you do, Dave, what are the core fundamentals? What are the prospecting, the delivering of the communication / pitch, you know, and deliberately practice that. Cal Newport makes the point that only athletes deliberately practice. So if you're in an industry where people aren't deliberately practicing, you have a huge competitive opportunity to actually try to get better. How can you make your pitch 1% better next time you do it? Think about it and practice it. It's an obvious thing, but few people do that in non-athletic or musical kind of performance-based domains. And then with the prospecting, what I would do if I were in that situation, and I know you encourage, I'm sure you encourage this, set a very specific target. The most popular blog post in Harvard Business Review's history, which you guys can check out, by Heidi Grant Halverson. I think it's called The 9 Things Successful People Do Differently, right? The number one thing is they create specific goals. General vague goals don't work. If you say I need to prospect more, you need to determine how many prospecting outreaching calls or whatever the form is for you are you going to do this year, this quarter, this month, this week, today. That's why I create at the level I create. If I didn't have forced specific constraints and goals, there's no way I'd produce at the level I do, because it's way easier to not work hard. But when I say to my members, I'm going to give you 10 new notes and 2 new master classes, it's right at the edge of my possible. I don't have time to mess around. So that's what I would do. I would set a really clear, challenging, meaningful goal, tie it to your purpose, to support your family and to become a master craftsman, etc., support the other families you're serving, and make it doable. Don't be silly about it and make it impossible to stretch, and then go hit it. That's some thoughts. And then the final thought is, the ultimate way I think that we get so good that people can't ignore us isn't actually in what we do. It's in all the peripheral things. It's in who we are. So, you know, as I build my business, the number one thing I'm trying to do is to be the embodiment of the thing that I'm trying to sell, which is optimal living. And so that, as I said in our last chat, is my company's greatest asset, is my consciousness and who I am as a human being, and why I aspire, one of the reasons why I aspire to work as hard as I do. And that's my encouragement, is for each of us to become as virtue-driven and as solid of a human being as we can possibly be, to serve as profoundly as we can, so that when people think of us, they don't just think of us as the best mortgage coach and provider. That's a given that we need to be that, but we're the best human being they know. We're the one that when they interact with us, we just make their days better. You know, we're just really pleasant, inspiring people to be around, and we offer them value way beyond the basic nuts and bolts. And again, that's an obvious thing, but I think ultimately that's what we want to do. And to Wally's point, that feels really good. Harder work, but it feels really, really good.
This has been an amazing interview. I'm going to push a poll here in a second. Wally, I'm going to give you the last questions, see where this goes. But you know, Wally, as a mortgage professional, you've taken things to the highest level. You've heard what Brian has shared with us. You know, what words of wisdom do you kind of wrap up today's call on, and any last questions you have for Brian? And folks, while I'm pushing that, I'm going to put a poll out. Let us know what you thought of today's call. You know, did it wow you with value? Did you get some solid takeaways? Let us know what you thought of today's call. Wally, thoughts and a question for Brian.
Wow. Absolutely. I feel very honored to be on the call. And Brian, I mean, you've taught me a lot, so I really appreciate your time. First of all, thank you for that. And just one last question. I've got a 10-year-old named Braden, and Alexander, he's 9. I call him Alexander the Great. And it just what I want to ask. Obviously, you said your son is 3.5. As a fellow father and a fellow leader of your family, what do you feel like when I read and I'm talking to my boys about what I've read and kind of sharing them? I mean, do you follow not necessarily a model, but how do you express to them from your heart what you've read and seen teach and impact them is the same way.
Such good stuff. And first, thank you for your kind words, and thank you for your great questions. I really appreciate your passion and your wisdom. It makes it so fun for me. So you got me all fired up, and I appreciate you helping me shine. And then with Brandon and Alexander, my wife's name is Alexandra, so I have an affinity to Alexander. Okay. I'm actually preparing for a class that we're going to share on Father's Day called Fatherhood 101, How to Win Dad of the Year While Doing Your Life's Work is the subtitle. And the first idea is another idea inspired by grit. I never knew the word parenting comes from the Latin word to bring forth. To be a parent is literally to bring forth the potential of our children. And I found that so inspiring, and the first idea in my class is going to be, what is it that you want to bring forth? When you imagine your child in 10, 25, 50 years, God willing, who are they? What is it that you have the honor and the privilege to help bring forth? And even as I was reflecting on that, I've thought about it on a high level, and I'm obviously passionate about a lot of ideas, but to really get clear on that, and concretize that, I think is important. And then we can obviously talk about that a lot longer, but for me, it's all virtue, it's all arte, and it's all embodiment. I really believe the idea that kids don't listen to what we say, but they never fail to imitate who we are and what we do. So that's my thing, is that whenever I find these ideas that inspire me, I'm less about, and I as much as you can lecture a 3.5-year-old, I just contextually am dropping little things all the time, but I'm always looking at it and saying to myself, do I want my kid to have that thought pattern or to do that behavior? Is that really who I want him to be? And that's my compass toward arte. And I'm far from perfect, and I never will be perfect, but that's what drives me. And I find that when I'm doing that is when we have the deepest connection, and I trust that, we're so early in the game, but I trust that that's going to be the compass that guides me for a long time.
Wonderful.
Wow.
Got it.
Wow. Well, fantastic call, everyone. Remember, for next week's call, always go to Mortgage Coach, go to our calendar section. Also, these videos are recorded and uploaded into our YouTube channel. Brian, thank you once again for taking time away from your mission, although hopefully we're adding to your mission for all you for all you mortgage coaches out there. I can't urge you enough, connect with Brian. It's brianjohnson.me. Become part of his community. I can't think of a better way to invest $10 a month than, and really it's not the $10 a month, it's the time that you take listening to his content and netting it out for yourself. Go in, there's hundreds. How many videos did you say are in here?
I actually don't know the count, hundreds and hundreds, yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds. Whatever topic you want to learn something on, go to the topic. Tremendous content. And Wally, thank you for preparing, and thanks for the time that you took. Hopefully we'll see many of you on Wednesday's mobile training tomorrow at 11. And every day of the week there's Mortgage Coach training. Check it out on our calendar. Take care, everyone, and have a fantastic week.